So thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks for getting that recording going. And so I will turn it over to Bradley Putnam, who will just do our typical meeting preamble. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. This is the meeting of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. You're invited to participate in the transportation planning process, regardless of race, color, national origin, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, sex, age, sexual orientation, gender identity expression, veteran status, or background. All meeting participants will join muted microphones, but you may unmute yourself. Please rename yourself to include your first name, your last name, and your affiliation. To participate in the discussion, please use the raise hand function in Zoom. You can find that by clicking on the participants button above the screen, and a window will pop up, and you can raise your hand so that the chair knows that you wish to be recognized. If you're joining us by telephone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Logan Casey via the chat box or email address. And this meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom is compliant with exceptions with web content accessibility standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to fully participate in the meeting, please contact Logan Casey. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Putnam. So I think we have a level of attendance where we can spend a little time going around with some quick introductions. So I will just call the participants list, and if you want, repeat your name and tell us a little bit about your organization, that would be great. So I will start with Stella Jordan.
Thank you, Len, and hi, everyone. I am Stella Jordan. I am the Public Engagement Coordinator at the staff to the MPO. And I am looking forward to working more closely with RTAC and all of you in the coming year.
Thank you, Stella. Thank you. John Seward.
John Seward, Booth, Mass.
Thank you, John. AC Bracosa.
Anna Christina Fregoso with the Boston Society of Civil Engineers.
Thank you, Anna Christina. David Montgomery.
David Montgomery with the town of Needham.
Thank you, David. Fred Mosley.
Yeah, Fred Mosley representing the American Council of Engineering Corporations, ACEC.
Thank you, Fred.
Yep.
Jennifer Rowe.
Hi, Jennifer Rowe with the Boston Transportation Department, and I'm on the active transportation team, so working on bicycle and pedestrian projects.
Thanks, Jennifer. John McQueen.
John McQueen, Walk Boston.
Thank you, John. Owen McDonald.
Owen McDonald, town of Weymouth.
Thank you, Owen. Scott Zizakis.
Scott Zidakis, National Rural Transit Assistance Program, and Vice Chair of this group.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. And Sid Kashi.
Sid Kashi, GPI. Thank you.
And GPI is what?
Is a consulting engineering firm.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I'm Len Diggins, and I am the chair, and I also represent the MBTA Right of Roadside Committee on the council. And so I'm saving Mr. Miller for last because he is going to be our guest. There are lots of really smart people on the board, and I look forward to all of their questions and comments. But Ken, it's someone that I hold in very high regard, and so I wasn't surprised to find out that he was actually a member of CTPS, and so when I found out, it's like, oh, that all makes sense. That's why he's so very knowledgeable, and so he'll tell us maybe a little bit about his history at CTPS, and where he is now. But here to talk with us about how we can hopefully increase our pipeline of projects for the MPO is Mr. Ken Miller.
Well,
Thank you, Len. I did work at CTPS for about 8 years. I'm not going to say when. It was a long time ago. And since then, I worked at Massdot for about 15 years. I was director of planning for quite a few years. And now I'm with the Federal Highway Administration here in Cambridge at the Massachusetts Division office. So thank you for that. Very nice introduction, Len. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen now, so give me a moment. Okay, I'm waiting for the red line. So can folks see this? Yeah. Okay, great. Well, as Len mentioned, I want to talk about creating a pipeline of projects for the Boston MPO, and I want to tell you why. There we go. Why it's important and what the issue is. First a little, but before that, I wanted to talk a little bit about, the new funding environment for transportation and the MPO. But after that, I'll talk about opportunities to find good projects and ways to get those projects developed. So as most folks know, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill, was signed by President Biden last November, substantially increasing funding for transportation from about $45 billion a year, typically in the past, to about $70 billion a year. So it's a 5-year bill, $350 billion over 5 years. It created more than a dozen new highway programs, both formula programs, which is funding that is allocated to states and then is passed through to the MPOs by some sub-allocation formula. So that's basically what the Boston MPO target money is. It's formula funding that's in effect sub-allocated. But then it created a lot of new discretionary programs. And one of the more interesting things about that is that it's allowing a lot more different kinds of proponents. So for a lot of the programs, there's maybe 20 or 25 programs, maybe even more. Municipalities, MPOs, tribal governments, they're all different kinds of counties, all different kinds of folks, depending upon the program, can be applicants and also direct recipients of the funding if they so choose. So what does that mean for Massachusetts, basically? So for the next 5 years, total highway formula funding will be about $5.4 billion, over $1 billion a year. That's an increase of about $2 billion of the previous amount. But that includes new formula programs. So it's a $450 million increase, about 20% for the existing formula programs, the ones we know and love, like CMAC and National NHPP and STPG, that kind of thing. But it created these new formula programs, the most significant of which is a new bridge formula program. So Massachusetts is going to be getting about $250 million a year in new bridge formula funding. So it's going to make a huge difference over the next 5 years in Massachusetts. So this is I want to talk about, okay, so what does this mean for the MPO and why are we do I think there's an issue with not having enough projects in the pipeline? As you can see for this, I know it's probably a little small, but you can see that on the second line here, let's see if I can use my pointer. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Use a laser. You can see how this works, but you can see in this second line here, it's an increase of about $20 million or 19% in the target funding for each of the 5 years. So the total available funding for the MPO is about $125, $100 to $130 million a year. So this was back in March. But so what happened? So the MPO needed to find $105 million worth of funding, but some big projects like Rutherford Avenue in Boston got delayed. Some other projects got shifted around. And so, the MPO needed to fill the gap and find projects to fill this $100 million gap. And you can see in the yellow highlighted here, it varies by year, of course, but in these early years, there's some pretty significant gap in the funding available and the projects that were available to utilize that funding. And so what did the MPO do? The MPO decided to just, rather than have the money go unused, they decided to just program some state projects to use up that $100 million. Here we go. So I think that it's important. There are two aspects of creating a pipeline of projects. One is finding good projects and then figuring out a way to get them designed, the projects developed and get them designed and ready to be advertised and implemented. So I'm going to talk about 4 different opportunities I think that we have to find good projects, and I'll talk to them each in turn. So first is, I think there's an opportunity to mine MPO studies that have already occurred and are already in the UPWP. CTPS does a lot of great work. I think their corridor studies, the folks that do their corridor studies, are top notch, and they come up with great recommendations that are generally very well received and supported by the communities and the agencies that are responsible for them. Here is a list. This is right from the MPO website of all the corridor studies in the past 5 or 6 years. I would venture to say I didn't do a cross-check of these studies with the tip or what's being developed, but I would venture to say that many of these, the recommendations from many of these studies are just sitting there. In addition, the MPO does other kinds of studies. It does transit studies. Here are some bicycle and pedestrian studies, and there's one there in particular where it says bicycle network gaps feasibility evaluation. That project actually had some specific recommendations for projects in Cambridge and Framingham, in Weston, Waltham, and Belmont for the Mass Central Trail. I don't, Len, you maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I don't recall seeing these projects, in the universe of projects to be developed. I may be wrong on that.
Well, I think you're right. But certainly going back and taking a closer look would be a good idea.
Right. The MPO can do more of these studies. Something else the MPO could do, it could conduct project-specific modal planning. The state does this. Very often the state does, more policy level plans, but there's nothing that prevents the MPO from doing project-specific modal planning. The MPO could do an MPO bicycle plan, a pedestrian plan. These are just, I just came up with these sort of off the top of my head. You could do for each of these plans, you could do sort of a gap analysis, identify a reasonable network, bicycle network, or that would make sense, and come up with a list of prioritized projects for each of these plans. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do them all at once, I would imagine, but that would be one way to sort of find good projects. A third way is the existing Boston MPO congestion management process. The MPO is required by federal regulation to have what's called a congestion management process. It used to be called a congestion management plan, but this is right from this language is right from the website. The CMP monitors the network to determine locations and sources of congestion. And you can see the highlight there, identifies and implements strategies that alleviate congestion. I should point out it's not just highway congestion. The term congestion is taken very broadly to mean you could have park and ride lots that are too crowded, or bicycle and pedestrian facilities that are congested, or transit parking for that matter. But it's not, but it's not clear that this has resulted in in any kind of project recommendations, even though it talks about implementing strategies. So for example, here is a product. This is also from the website. This was an intersection improvement program in 2017 that recommended some specific intersection improvements. But note what's in highlighted there, and I'll come back to this. This program received funding to make recommendations, but not to implement the improvements. Municipalities could choose to affect these suggestions at their discretion, but need to absorb the implementation costs themselves. That's something that I'm going to talk about, and maybe a barrier to getting projects implemented. There is one more maybe avenue to find projects, find good projects. There's a lot of available Mass-DOT data, which the MPO utilizes already and has access to, but the state does modal plans. There's a statewide bicycle plan, pedestrian plan, freight plan, rail plan. Also, the state does corridor studies, transit studies. They have the list of high crash locations. They do an asset management plan. All this information can be leveraged into Boston region specific project information and a way to find projects. And I think to summarize how to find projects, I think overall it will be helpful to have more of a project focus at the MPO level, and to recognize that it's part of what the MPO should be doing. I should note that at other MPOs around, all the other MPOs in Massachusetts, there are 9 others and 3 other regions that act like MPOs but aren't officially MPOs. At every meeting, the local Mass DOT districts come and report on project milestones. What got advertised, what got awarded, what is the construction milestones, what has been completed. That gets reported out and is of major interest at every other MPO in Massachusetts, but that doesn't, as far as I can tell, that doesn't happen in the Boston MPO. So once you find all these good projects, well, how do you develop them? Remember what we saw in the previous slide about the CMP, that it's the way things work now very often, we're waiting, the MPO waits for municipalities to propose projects. And also Mass DOT can also, propose and fund projects. But what is the issue with that? I mean, it also depends. It depends on who owns the road, and sometimes most often it's a municipality. It could be Massdot. It could even be another state agency like DCR. But municipalities very often don't have the funding or the capacity or the expertise or the staff even to propose and then get that project developed. And of course, it varies greatly among the 97 communities in the MPO. I mean, the city of Boston has Boston Transportation Department and DPW, and they do a great job of getting projects proposed, funded, and designed, and they can do it. But there are communities that don't have town planners, that may not have full-time town engineers even. And how do they, and then very often they have to rely on consultants, and they may just not have the funding to get a project development. And there's also, a bit of I should point out that project development includes design, environmental clearances, right-of-way. And by the way, all of those activities are eligible for federal funding. So I think looking at the third bullet, what could be a way to address the issue of lack of resources, perhaps by municipalities to develop projects. Well, the MPO could program funding for project development that municipalities could use. If they did, they could hire consultants, they could hire staff. It's an eligible design, right-of-way, environmental work are all eligible federal activities. The MPO could use allocate target funding for Massdot even to develop projects that perhaps would normally develop by a municipality if the municipality didn't feel they had the resources or the I'm not going to say the inclination, because you do want buy-in from the community. You don't want to design a project in a community, the community doesn't want it, obviously. But but Massdot could, if they had the capacity, they could also do design projects. And then I'm going to talk, the fifth bullet there is nothing prevents an MPO from getting involved in project development. An MPO can hire a consultant. An MPO can hire staff. It's not the normal thing, but it's certainly a possibility and eligible. And I'm sort of just throwing that out there as a possibility. I just wanted to touch base at this next slide. I did want to mention all those discretionary programs, and I just want to point out that this is just a list of some of them, that all these entities, MPOs, locals, tribes, these are eligible recipients for all those programs. So in summary, what is needed? I think two things: a renewed focus by the MPO on finding projects and having that be part of the mission of the MPO, not just waiting for municipalities or other entities to propose projects. And then thinking about some new or innovative ways to get those projects developed, maybe using target funding for either municipalities, Massdot, or the MPO itself to move project development forward. And so that's the extent of my presentation, Len. I'm very happy to take questions and be part of a discussion.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. So maybe Bradley, you can drop us into just gallery mode, or Ken can stop screen sharing. But then instead of you,
yes, let me try to hold on 1 second.
And then Bradley, instead of you sharing your screen, we'll just let everyone see each other.
Yeah, can you?
Ken, I can unshare you for you.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. And so, if you could raise your hands electronically, that would help me. But I can't see everyone, so I'll try and keep track of who's raising their hand and when. But the electronic raise hand helps me determine the order. Have at it. Yes, Christina.
I'm just wondering, you said that this was an unexpected boost to the budget for this year and next year. How do we know that projects are not being rushed through before they've moved out of conceptual phase? Like, what is the quality of projects being targeted?
Target. Excuse me. Target. Is that a question for me? Targeted.
Yeah, I'm wondering if or if this body would have any direction on where the money gets programmed, like which projects are worthy, who has the final voice in saying who is acceptable.
Well, the MPO evaluates each project. They have evaluation criteria. They evaluate the projects, and it's up to the MPO to decide, as long as the projects are eligible, how to allocate that $120 million of funding each year. One would think that there are many more projects then there is funding, and that's always the case, right? But the MPO is in a position where not enough projects are ready. And I think that, some of the things I discussed are maybe, relate to, going out and finding. I didn't say just find projects. I always talk about finding good projects. I think the MPO can play a larger role in doing that, rather than just waiting for a town with resources to propose something.
I think maybe extending on Anna Christine's question, I'm not going to say this is what she meant, but certainly it made me think, wow, this is so you talked about various initiatives, plans that are already out there that the MPO could say, okay, let's try and develop projects according to this plan, like the bicycle plan or the ped plan. What would be the criteria that we would use for determining which plan, in order to promote, that'd be something for us to think about. We'd have to work that out, but it's an interesting, policy thing that for us to contemplate, so I don't know if you want to add more to that, but that's what she sparked that thought in me, and that's how I would respond to it.
Well, again, that's up to the MPO to prioritize. Remember, the MPO develops the Unified Planning Work Program every year, which describes, the work that the staff will be doing on their behalf.
Yep.
And it's up to, whatever the MPO thinks is important.
Yeah. It's fine with me. So John McQueen.
John, I'm so
You're on
sorry. I hit the button ahead of you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, John, go ahead.
Got it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, thank you very much. That was great. Helps us, especially that last chart that you had of the array of some of the areas and maybe the sources of funding or interest. That's something, that could be distributed even to the municipalities. That could be great. One of the things, I've got a few ideas. One I put in the chat, but before that, we've been discussing here at the advisory council for the MPO to budget and program more funds and resources for municipalities, especially those that are under resourced, let's say in the planning area. And that could help things come to the surface and to fruition, along with that other item that you had, which was Massdot or MPO taking more responsibility in some of the execution or oversight of that. I know that on the rail trails, they do provide construction management, which helps, but there are other aspects to make things come to light. One of the top priorities, and one that I put in the chat, was, and you mentioned bridges, but with the change of administrations from Patrick to Baker, the accelerated bridge repair program really fell into disrepair, if you will, or ghosted. And in particular, we're now focused on some mega projects, particularly the I-90, which has a whole regional, not just local to Alston and Brighton and such, but it impacts Cambridge, Boston, et cetera. But it's not too big to fail. And it could fail or get really compromised if the River Street and the Western Avenue bridges, which are very vital to the circulation within Alston, the construction areas, to Cambridge Street, which is also slated for a priority rehabilitation. Those all could be compromised if those bridges, which were slated for repair, scheduled for repair in the spring of 2014, and that just went away. And I'm sure, in fact, I've seen some subsequent reports, they haven't gotten any better. I mean, they were structurally deficient then, and they haven't been attended to. And so that could be a simmering problem too, especially with, we saw, I think, with Longfellow at one point, and some of the concrete falling into the river and being dangerous to the boaters. So that's another dimension to, at least get the sense of urgency, not just to facilitate the logistics. I think the mega project of I-90, but just plain old safety. So I know that they're reevaluating that, but if they can put that on a priority list and get all the funding that they need to put it on a fast track, that I think would help. So again, thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Massdot. I don't know if anybody from Massdot is on the call, but
well, Mike O'Dowd's been talking on this one, so he's on it, and so is Jonathan.
Right, but no, I meant on this on this meeting. But there is just in terms of what the Boston MPO does, the sort of the funding sort of gets split between state side of the Boston MPO tip and the regional side, the target side, and the state sort of prioritizes the bridge projects. The MPO doesn't have to program them the way the state wants them to, but generally there's really no reason not to. But there is a lot more funding. I should point out that the Massdot does, there is that additional bridge formula funding. Preservation is an eligible federal item for that funding. Massdot also has their new bridge investment program. I'm sorry, their next gen bridge program, right? The next gen bridge program, which is sort of the next version of the accelerated bridge program, which is I think $1.5 billion. So that's $3 billion dedicated to bridges. I should point out in the bridge formula program that $225 million a year or so. There's a 15% set aside for what's called off-system bridges. That are bridges that are eligible for federal aid, but not on the federal aid system. So those are bridges very often are municipally owned. So there's a 15% set aside and those funds cannot be used for anything else. So if I was a municipality now, I'd be checking my inventory of bridges that I owned, seeing which ones were qualified for the off-system bridge money and talking to my district office.
A question, if I can interrupt, Ken. Would Cambridge Street, right around where it intersects with Harvard, would that Harvard Street, would that qualify as a bridge? Because it is a raised structure at that point. I think that is a rehabilitation. That would be a municipality.
I'm not exactly sure which one you're referring to, but if it's on the bridge inventory, if it's
okay,
then it would be eligible for federal funding.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Ken. And next we have Jen Rowe.
Hi. So first, Ken, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really
How are you?
interesting and informative, and it's good to see you again. Different role now. I wanted to actually share a little bit. Len actually was there as well. The CTPS had this exchange with Miami-Dade County MPO on Friday of last week, and it was very inspiring to see what they've done. I'll put a link in the chat, and there's a video that they shared with us that was really impressive. They have kind of that MPO and the two other MPOs in South Florida have all come together and done long range planning on a transit system, combination of rail and bus rapid transit, and then like some planning around the different nodes on that network to make it bikeable and walkable in the first mile, last mile. So it's a very like comprehensive, very visionary effort that is knowing MPOs, like I can't even imagine how many different actors they've had to bring together across 3 different MPOs that are voluntarily working together. And I think it, to me, was like, oh, wow, like MPOs can do this type of work. So anyway, I'll drop the link into the chat to kind of share some of that inspiration. But I guess one thing that I wanted to speak to, and maybe it's convenient that no one from Massdot's on this call, but I guess one thing that I see as a reason why the MPO is not able to take that visionary of a stance is the relationship between Massdot and the MPO. In that, and I speak this is someone who was on staff and kind of got to witness some of these dynamics, but Massdot chairs the MPO permanently. Massdot has 4 voting representatives if you include the MBTA. Not only that, but they have their funding accounts for like 1/3 of CTPS's operating budget, which kind of CTPS acts as like an internal consultant to Massdot. And so Massdot gets to approve CTPS overhead, indirect expenses, raises, individual staff salaries. So anyway, so all of this leads to, I think, a relationship where staff doesn't often can't work at all at cross purposes or even be perceived as working cross purposes to Massdot or advancing things that are perhaps not something that the higher leadership of the state has endorsed explicitly. And that makes, I think, CTPS, as much as I love the organization, they do amazing work and they're serve as a check on sort of transparency in transportation funding and a check on some community process aspects. I don't think they're able to serve in this kind of visionary role of like really finding projects and doing that type of work in the current setup. So I just wanted to put that out there because it's something I've like thought a lot about, and I think it's a big, somewhat of a challenge if in that we're operating under in CTPS's organizational structure.
If I may, Len, I
yeah.
understand that. I understand that, Jen. You know, when we did our, as you know, we have to do our certification reviews every 4 years of MPOs, and in our last certification review, we recognized that to some extent, and we recommended that the MPO develop, you know, an operations plan to help, you know, to better define the roles of the state and the staff and MAPC and the board, and so the MPO is moving forward. They developed a strategic plan, and they're, you know, getting to work on the operations plan, which I think will be helpful. But, you know, at the end of the day, though, the MOU says that the staff is directed by the MPO. I mean, that's the way I view it. And it's certainly up to the MPO to, you know, to decide, you know, how they want their, you know, their staff and their funds to be expended. Look, and I'm not naive either. You know, I understand that, you know, there are going to be interactions and things at play, but you have to, you know, the MPO has to have the desire to do some things, and then you try to figure out how to get it done. And I'm sorry I missed the Miami thing. I was actually in DC doing some training, but I would have liked to have been there too. So,
Thanks for response, Ken. And before I move to David, I'll say that yes, they did cross. It was a combination of 3 MPOs, Miami, Dade, and Broward. But they were impressed that our MPO had 97 municipalities. You know, when they heard that number, they were like, "Wow!" Because I think maybe, you know, even with all 3 of theirs, they're still not being at 97 municipalities. I heard 35 tossed around, but I don't know if 35 was for the trio or if it was just one of them. You know, and so yeah. I mean, we're coordinating. You know, well, not coordinating, but we're responsible for a lot of municipalities. And dare I say, our municipalities, I think, probably have a different structure than the ones that they're dealing with. I mean, as we know, cities are different than towns. But I don't know if they have anything that compares to towns. And in their counties or whatever. However they define their regions. But what I'll also say to what Jen has brought up. And what you were saying, Ken, about the MPO can direct how the staff works. But I think what Jen's saying though is if Massdot has essentially control of the MPO, essentially the staff is going to be doing what Massdot wants it to do. And what I see, I don't know if I see this as so much of a problem with the structure, as much as it is a problem with the way that members come on to the board. It's like a lot of us defer to Massdot, and also to people like you who have been around a lot. You just know so much more than we do. So that when you talk, we generally listen. And so when we hear advice coming from you, it's really hard pressed to go against that advice. It takes a while for one to feel even confident enough to ask questions, and then it takes a while to go beyond asking questions to like synthesizing the knowledge, and then feeling like, oh, okay, I can propose something, especially when it comes to like a vision. And what I find Massdot does a lot, is it just kind of like ground you in reality and say, well, you can go down this road if you want, but it's not going to go anywhere, and so you're kind of hard pressed to go, oh, well, let's go down that road. Anyways, we hear that a lot when it comes to congestion pricing and exploring, those avenues. So, anyways, I'll stop now and turn it over to Dave Montgomery.
Thanks, Len. And thank you, Ken, for a great presentation. I guess I have a quick clarification question and then a couple of observations. The clarification question is, so it seems like you've done a lot of good thinking here. You've got a very nice presentation, and I'm not entirely clear, is this a sort of a sua sponte effort on your part to stir up the pot a little bit within the MPO and including us, but there is, I mean, to the extent there is sort of some movement here, we're in the process of trying to build it right now, and by hearing you out and saying, yeah, good idea. And if that's the case, then I'm with you, and I'm saying, yeah, good idea. And I think that we as an advisory council, I would be very much in favor in saying, yeah, I think that's a great thing for us to do, to endorse that kind of a rethink. So if that's the clarification I'm seeking. And then the comments that I just would make is, I think to some extent with regard to the MPO, it's guilty of what by nomenclature is guilty of what a lot of town planning departments or planning boards are guilty of, which is they don't do as much actual planning as the name would imply. There's a kind of like we respond to proposals made by developers or what have you, but it's not really kind of a proactive regional planning approach. And yet here we are in the Boston region metropolitan planning organization with the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. We I think would be well served to try to remember and ground ourselves regularly in a regional approach. And that's where I think some of what you've said in your presentation, Ken, could be really helpful, because we don't, at least at the minute, my understanding at the municipal level, we get caught in our little silo. We have to try to figure it all out, and we don't know how to get the towns nearby to be on the same page with us. And we're sometimes competing for funding sources to do the project, whereas I think the larger bodies like this one, like the MPO, are uniquely situated to incentivize the towns to work together and to recognize at some funding level that if you do work together, you achieve economies of scale that will result in infrastructure development that is significantly better than what the towns will do on their own. And ultimately, the funding is coming from either from state or federal sources. So there's an interest on the part of the larger organization to facilitate that cooperation and achieve the better pricing. So I'll stop now, but thank you very much for a great presentation.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not trying to stir up, just to clarify, I'm not trying to stir up the pot per se. I did mention at an MPO meeting that, back in April or March when this, issue arose, I did mention that I had some thoughts about how to, get some more projects in the pipeline, good projects. Len invited me to talk to this body, so I'm happy to. So I was happy to do it.
Yes. Yes, I belong under that bus, because he mentioned that, and I just jumped right on it, and I had said, well, I hope that we will, have this on the agenda at an MPO meeting, but I don't really have control of the agenda. I'm sure that I could ask. I'm not trying to paint the chair, because I actually like the Massdot people. I really do. They're good people. They're really knowledgeable people, and we're all on the same page. I'm sure I could push to get it on the agenda, but then it's like I'm the chair of this. And it's like, and I think this was really a good venue, and we have more time that we can devote to it. So I thought it'd be a really good opportunity for us to just have some time with Ken to talk about this very complex issue. And I think there are a lot of smart people here, and a lot of people been around a lot. And I think we could probably work on our sense of a vision, and bring it to the board through your chair, who will speak on your behalf happily anytime. But with respect to the issue that you brought up about the towns next to each other, working with each other, the MPO does have the sub-regions, and they have these sub-regional meetings, and so I think on some level, the MPO is trying to do that, and I think
those are MAPC subregions that the MPO works with, but they're not truly divisions of the MPO.
But just to point out, I don't know if you're aware, but this past year, the MPO changed the way that MPO members are going to be elected. So they will be elected by subregion. So each subregion will elect their own members, as opposed to having all municipalities vote for the members. So I think that's one change. I think it's a step in the right direction. So I think, yes, you're right. They are MAPC subregions, but the MPO sort of has adopted them. And I think that there's an opportunity for each subregion to weigh in.
I'll confess, at the small town level, it's a challenge just to remind people the difference between the MAPC, the CTPS, the MPO. It just becomes an alphabet soup that people are it glazes over, and they adopt simple shortcuts. Like in our town, I hear the word the tip is used to mean essentially any state funding that goes through that has some relation to the MPO. So yeah, in theory we have all these great representation things, but we have a very limited amount of bandwidth to stay on top of it all.
I hear you. The goal is trying to increase the bandwidth, and part of that is bringing more people on board, but also helping those who are already participating become more efficient. And by that I just mean getting up to speed faster. And then there's always a tension between keeping experience, but also allowing space for diversity. And so I have some ideas along those lines. We'll hear about that later when we talk about outreach. So I'm just going to check to see where the time is on the agenda. Bradley, can you tell what time I said we were going to finish up this segment and then move to the next one?
Around now.
Around now? Excellent. So Jen,
It's okay. We can go to the next topic.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I have some. I built in some padding.
A little buffer.
Yeah, a buffer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to point out, and I'll see what I can find links to, but I attended a event hosted by NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials. Try to spell out all the acronyms. They did a whole thing on flexing funding to transit, which is something I was aware of that we did. We commonly move things over to the T, but this was specifically about that actually a lot of bike and bicycle and pedestrian and wayfinding and all sorts of other types of projects can be flexed to be under the like overall auspices of the FTA, which then has, it seems like they had a number of cities speak to this, but that then the design process ended up being a bit more useful, I guess, as opposed to having it going through federal highway, and which I found very interesting because I didn't know that was an option. And I think they actually said that a lot of times the federal highway and the Massdot or like the equivalents will appreciate that transfer because there's it's like everyone has a lot on their plate. And anyway, I'll try to find what resources I can share about it, but it was something that definitely opened my eyes to, oh, there might be some ways to be able to move projects, especially smaller projects, through this process in a more efficient way. Because I think often I hear, oh, we can't do this. That's just way too much work and it's not worth it for this type of project. So I'll pass along that info.
Thank you. And again, if you could send us to your presentation, we really appreciate it. So thanks.
Okay. Yep, I will.
So anything you want to say, in closing,
No, I just want to thank everyone for the time, and thank you, Len, for the opportunity to be here, and happy to come back at any time.
Great. Yeah, well, thank you. And you're welcome, and thank you. And I'll definitely be in touch. I mean, so you can, of course, hang around for as long as you want. But we're gonna move along, and we have like 2 special guests with us today. Tegan, our former chair, and Annette Dempster. I'm going to actually pull the new business ahead a little bit, so that Tegan can tell us about exciting possibility, opportunity for the advisory council, which may result in us having a meeting in August. So Tegan.
Sure. Thanks, Len. I'm very excited to be here. I'm sorry I didn't make the full presentation. It had some overlap, unfortunately, but I know I can watch these recordings after, so I might do that. Annette's here as well, and I won't call you out at this point in time, but she can also help answer questions about this. So the MPO has generally agreed to support MPO staff in collaboration with MAPC in applying for one of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law discretionary grants, which is the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant opportunity. Have folks on this call heard about that? Maybe you can see a nod or a shake. Seeing mostly no, some shakes. So this is essentially an opportunity that has both planning as well as implementation funds associated with it. And as the MPO, we are looking to apply for the planning portion of the grant monies to be able to create a comprehensive safety action plan for the region, which would then unlock, hopefully, or enable the opportunity for people to go for the implementation funds associated with specific projects or policies or other ways in which you might implement this safety action plan. If you don't know what a comprehensive safety action plan is, that's definitely okay. It is not a really clear concept. I would say that where cities and towns have gone through the process of developing their own Vision Zero plan, which is typically a very comprehensive process that works across multiple departments and divisions in that municipality, and then comes up with sort of a whole kind of usually menu list of things to do in terms of education, enforcement, infrastructure changes, et cetera. That type of thing will count as a comprehensive safety plan. So you can imagine that what we're doing is looking at doing something kind of backed out at a more regional scale. And again, meant to really be a collaborative effort to engage all the cities and towns in the region to be able to come up with something at the regional scale that can then serve as a vehicle for supporting applications for the implementation funds. We're still in the early stages of putting together, well, probably about in the mid stages of putting together the grant application materials. And so what we're doing is, we, the staff to the MPO, are working with MAPC as our fiduciary agent through whom the grant would flow, but also note that MAPC is vice chair on the MPO board. So there's and they have some of their own transportation planning staff. So it really is a truly collaborative effort. It's not, simply a pass through or something like that. And I think bringing together the expertise of the two agencies actually does make for a very strong application. And we talked this morning about it at the Intercore Committee Transportation meeting. We've sent out some emails to folks asking for people to reach out and engage if you're interested in collaborating on this, because the intent is to be inclusive and not exclusive, because we know that various entities, various MPOs in the states and other municipalities are considering themselves the ways that they want to engage in this grant opportunity. So that is my preview. The idea here is that I don't have all the answers, probably to any of your questions at this point yet, but we are developing this work, and we're going to go back to the MPO on the 21st next week and give them, right? I think that's right. Good. Annette, thank you for nodding at me. And then we'll be giving them a little bit more of a sense of how the scope of work, how we're thinking about that evolving. And then we'll go back to the MPO again in August and ask for their formal vote to approve the narrative that would then go into the grant application so that we could submit it by September 15th. That's kind of the timeline. One other thing I want to emphasize here that's interesting about this grant, I apologize, is that this is a grant that the state is not eligible for. So actually only regional agencies, MPOs, and cities and towns are eligible. There's a few more categories in there. So that's an interesting partnership as well, as that the state is also very interested in seeing these dollars come into the state to support safety work, but they themselves are not eligible. So it really is a regional, it's really well set up to be a regional effort. And so that's what we're trying to capitalize on and to tap into. I can pause there for a second. Again, I may not have answers to any questions, but if you'd like, we'd be happy to have some of the staff that are working on this come back and talk to you more about it as it's evolving.
John McQueen, and then I'll go after John.
Hi, Tegan. Would that be in addition to, let's say, the Chapter 90 monies, or would it be in the same bucket, let's say, as Chapter 90? No.
Completely independent discretionary pool of money going to this grant sources. And from what we understand, the feds are looking at in terms of the scale of these grants, it's pretty significant. It's potentially could be like $1 million planning grant. It would involve us engaging consultants. It would not be something we would be doing in-house.
But that's something that could be pooled together with Chapter 90 money if the project was, let's say, significant enough, or let's say outstrip the existing planning resources or execution resources of a municipality or a town, not a city.
I mean, I think that's a question when you get to the implementation funds. And I suspect, I mean, you do need matching, like local matching money to be able to get the federal dollars. And so in our case for the planning, we're looking to the state to support us in that. If you were actually getting to the point where a municipality was applying for the funds to do an infrastructure project, they might be looking to their local sources to be able to find that matching money to go with the federal funds.
Could CPA funds be applied for the matching?
I do not know the answer to that. I don't know if we know the answer to that, Annette. I don't know the answer to that yet. I'm sorry. I'm still trying to understand the ins and outs of the application, of the NOFO and the application. So I don't think I know. But Annette,
yeah, I believe it. No, I believe you're not allowed to use federal funds for the match, but I think anything else would qualify.
CPA is state, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Good luck getting that. So for your community, every time I hear about safety plans being at Vision Zero, I think about how every year the MPO gets a report about how we are. The recommendation is that we follow the state highway safety plan recommendations, and when I delved into that, I was really impressed by the effort. I mean, those folks are really serious about Vision Zero, getting to zero. The level of detail and the amount of effort that goes into it is really very impressive. And so, I mean, we would certainly have to coordinate on some level with them because they've done so much work already. And I understand that states can't apply to it. So I'm just wondering, how would we coordinate with them, or is that just something that comes out later on? Because you're aware of them, so.
Yes, no, that's a really important question, Len. And that's something we've been talking about from the very start. We met with the state very early on about the idea of the MPO going for this, because we also would be looking to the state for that matching support. And we talked about their statewide plan and the update that's going on right now, and the task force they have working on that. And we both sides agree that there's a way to develop a scope of work that would supplement, not build directly off of, but be a regionally focused plan that would hopefully take advantage of, build on, use elements of the state level that make sense, but it would also be linked to existing local Vision Zero plans that exist now too. So we are absolutely already talking to the cities and towns that already have Vision Zero projects, and we're also talking to the state about their state level project, because this needs to not duplicate. It needs to be in a smart place from that regional perspective. So I can't speak to the specifics of how we're going to work that out yet. So like I said, I don't have all the answers, but yes, we have been talking about that from the start. It's great that you brought that up.
Maybe in a coordinating body, because I already kind of feel that. I mean, like when people like in town in Arlington want to like do the Vision Zero thing, I'm like, the state's doing this, folks. I mean, let's work with them, and so I hear you. So well, you say the question at next week's meeting,
Okay.
so
Well, and we would expect, we can talk more about this now as we're applying, but we also absolutely 100% anticipate that this effort, if the MPO were to get the funds, would involve a pretty extensive task force, because again, this is about meeting the local needs, but also coordinating with the state level. So we would have a pretty robust process in terms of, it's not going to be happening like it's like technical work behind the scenes. So.
Well, thanks. So then what you mentioned this to me as an opportunity for the advisory council. So let's say we did have a meeting next month, because you're going to release this, discuss this with the MPO on next Thursday. And I guess you have before our September meeting to get back to have a response. So what would you like us to do next month if we met?
So next month would be great to, if we can talk to you a little bit more about how we're thinking about doing the work and like what, because I mean, we don't have to put all the details in the application, but we need to know what we think we're doing to get to the scale of the cost, make sure the narrative is right. So if we could get feedback and input on that and make sure that it's actually relevant for the very different, first of all, municipalities, but other stakeholders, and see if we're missing any early coordination points.
Yeah.
And then if you're in support of it, a support letter is a wonderful thing for us, for the MPO. It's not required by any means, but if you want to indicate your support in any way, and or it can just support your vote, Len, if you'd like, at the MPO meeting itself when the seats have to vote to approve the narrative.
Sure. And maybe we can try to get more people to the meeting, both members of the advisory council, maybe people outside who we may not have the ability to really speak at the MPO meetings. Well, they can, but you know what I mean. It's like the agendas are so packed, they can just come here and we can kind of devote the entire meeting to that. So okay, all right. John McQueen.
Yeah. Is in that meeting that's going to come up, we're presenting this whole concept, I guess, in the MPO and kind of ironing it out or fleshing it out rather. Are you going to be including some what if examples of real types of projects that you're going to be basing feasibility, let's say, or application of types of projects within a municipality or within a sub-region, for instance, maybe within a magic region or SWAP or something, but to have some tangible visions, I guess, as to how this might, come to fruition.
Yeah, let me start, and then Annette, if you want to clarify anything based on your engagement, just let me know. So we do think this process should lead to specific projects and also other actions and activities that could be done and funded. I don't think we have those projects, those sample projects or kind of key projects laid out in this application stage. What we have done so far, though, is for the application, you have to map out in a pretty extensive way sort of safety issues in the region. And so that starts to give you a key of where some of the focal areas of this kind of effort would be. So I think we have that sort of that level of start. But again, when we get to the point of bringing in projects, we know that there are locally prioritized projects and folks that have Vision Zero plans. We know that the state may have highlighted some. So where do we then also want to layer in from the regional perspective where the priorities are? And it could be that we also are able to focus in on multi-jurisdictional projects in a way that, maybe localities haven't been able to do that because they're looking at their own municipal boundaries. Hi, Ken, it's good to see you. So I think that's where we'll be. Annette, do you have a different answer than that?
No, I'll add to that though. I mean, we have the advantage of identifying corridors in the network where there should be high priority because of the crash rates and the of course, deaths and serious injuries are the two main factors. But the other thing that this plan allows us to do is to identify general strategies to reach Vision Zero type goals. And so while we might have some projects listed that are on that high priority network, we also will be identifying strategies to achieve reduced fatalities and serious injuries across the region. So if your project isn't in there, but your strategy is, you can still apply for an implementation grant.
So John?
So something like, let's say, the expansion, or let's say a road diet combined with expanding the just the whole footprint of the roadway to enable safer, let's say, bicycle and or allowing for sidewalks even on some of the smaller municipalities so that they can connect, let's say, to transit hubs. And that might span a municipalities. Would something like that be a conceptual fit to be considered, or things like that to make things more accessible and safer, I guess, but those conditions don't exist yet to just use paint to restripe?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. I mean, I think that developing the plan is what's going to work out what we include in it. So I can't tell you today what would be included in it, because there's a huge engagement element in developing this plan and identifying the priorities across the region and the types of projects. One of the things that we will identify is like low cost improvements. So we're talking about maybe setting up strategies where, you do these quick build things to test out what will work prior to, to get the buy-in prior to doing an expensive construction project. And those are the types of things that could be included in the strategies. I don't know if that answered your question.
Kind of. Well, thank you.
I mean, what you outlined sounds like it would be something that would be included, but I can't tell you that it will until we develop the plan.
And so at the meeting that we're going to have, we're going to have it. John, what we'll do is you'll tell us the things that you would like us to do, and then we'll figure out the strategy that will allow us to do them. So we're going to work from the bottom up.
You're too kind.
Well, no, it's just practical. It's just practical. No, it's a good idea. So let's figure out the strategy that gets us to do those things. So in that saying, we can't determine what we're going to do until we have a strategy. I understand that, but maybe we can let what we want to do help us determine what the strategy should be. So I mean, it's not. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I could say something more, but I haven't had enough sleep, so I'm not terribly coherent, right now. So all right. So we're going to meet on the second Wednesday of August, and we'll, maybe a shorter meeting, but it'll be kind of focused on this, and maybe the UPWP letter. So all right. Well, thanks so much. So this is be hard pressed to say no to any opportunity. That you bring our way, and this is a good one, Megan, and that. So hang around for as long as you want, but we're gonna move on to the next topic, which is discussion on outreach for new advisory council members. And so right now, I would like to bring back Stella Jordan. She introduced herself briefly when we did the initial go around, but Stella actually reached out to me last week, and we met Tuesday, yesterday, to talk a little bit more about what the staff can do to help us with respect to outreach. And so we will talk some more about things. I had mentioned that I was thinking about working with the advisory board of the MBTA, so we could do some outreach at the same time for both our organizations. But I'm going to stop now before I say more and just ask Stella if she wants to say more about our meeting or what she has in mind.
Yeah, thank you, Len. So yeah, I reached out because we at CTPS have been talking for a little while about ways that we can kind of better support the advisory council's work and also encourage increasing membership and participation, and really, taking full advantage of the idea that the advisory council is the main kind of public outreach branch of the MPO. So to that end, I work on the communications and engagement team. I'm the public engagement coordinator. So I was hoping to kind of step in the coming few months and take on kind of a more active role in, doing what I can to help with your work, whether that's connecting you with, other staff on CTPS for, discussions that you'd like to have on certain subjects, and making sure that you have timely opportunities to get involved in document development processes and things like that. And then also working with Len on public engagement in terms of spreading the word about this good work, making sure people know, understand what the MPO is and what we're trying to do, and then hopefully really boosting participation in the advisory council and membership as well. So I, early stages, I'm open to any ideas you all have. I want to be here kind of as a resource as well. So yeah, that's my pitch.
Thanks, Stella. And yeah, I mean, I think we'll follow up on discussion because we need to think about how large we want to be. Realistically, probably in our next outreach effort, we may not get that many people, but let's say we are just really successful. What do we think is kind of a good range of size to have? And then if we should go over that, how do we handle it? It'd be a nice problem to have. I have more to say, but I'm going to stop because I see Christina's hand up. Anna?
Oh, I just had a quick follow-up. I know David mentioned it earlier, but could part of the outreach be some sort of a way to differentiate, the MAPC from the MPO, from the RTAC, from, all this, like he said, alphabet soup that way? I think it would be helpful because I have heard this similar issue, and I myself have wondered at times, who does what, So I think it'd be great to show some sort of a chart, a flow chart.
I hear you. Well, I'll tell you, it doesn't help us at the MPO that the word transportation isn't in our name. So it's like MAPC is, and the planning. Actually, I'm going to screw it up now. So it's the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, right? It's council. Okay. And so it's planning there, and then we're the Metropolitan Planning Organization. It's how can you ask people to distinguish between those two when they both have planning? You try to tell them, well, the MPO does transportation, doesn't have transportation, and so that just minor change would help. They still have a lot to sort through, but just that little bit could unconfuse us and just separate us out from MPC. But
are you campaigning to put a T in there? MTPO?
Well, I'm not campaigning on this one. I'm just not expending any capital on it because it's just so obvious. And so either people are going to do it or they're not, but I'm not, because I talk enough and I push enough stuff that I'm not going to spend any capital on this one, but in this context, I'll say it, but if if the council wants to, make me say something at a board meeting, I'll say it, so that's there's that on that. And so the other idea that I have is I can't take credit for it. It actually came out. I found out about it when we were doing the strategic plan for CTPS. One MPO has this MPO university. And actually, I think I mentioned to Sandy and maybe someone else who thought it's a good idea. It's really a matter of how we implement it here because there are lots of good ideas, but there just isn't time, or staff resources to do it. But I think maybe the advisory council could try to do something like that. But we have a real structured program where we teach people how the MPO works, how the advisory council works, maybe have them accompany us to a meeting, especially with the meetings virtual now. They could actually participate in the meeting, then after the meeting, we just do a debrief, maybe take a corridor project and really break that down and just really train people so that they understand how the MPO works. And then when they come on board, there's hardly any onboarding because they are aware of things. So I think that's the way that you can get the diversity, but then not lose the experience of having a new person get up to speed. And in the university, as people have to apply for it. It might be in the beginning that we take anyone because, well, no one's really much applying for it. But you go out into the communities, trying to get the diversity that you want. So you kind of like build that pool of diversity and knowledge. And who knows, maybe they'll become part of the advisory council, but maybe they'll become part of other entities in town, transportation related, but they would be coming through us, and that would kind of get the word about the MPO, and the advisory council out there. So I kind of want to work on that, so we'll see. I want to work on lots of things, but I think I'm gonna try and really work on that, and that'll blend into the next topic, and that is early discussion about vice chair and chair. So I'll just say now that if you'll have me, I will do one more year. That's it. It's not that I'm leaving out of disgust or anything. In fact, I'm not leaving at all. And stay around me. I kind of like the notion of doing a full LRTP cycle, and that's it. Because I think it really will be time for someone else to come on board. That said, we do have a process. So if someone wants to do it next year, I am really willing to work with you now to help you just get you more up to speed now. And if there's more than one person who's thinking about going for it, I'll be happy to work with both of you all. You don't have to do this at all. Come October, you can just throw your hat in the ring, and there's no offense, but I'll tell you, chances are if you throw your hat in the ring, I'm not going to compete against you, because if you really want to do it enough to throw your hat in the ring, I'm going to support you, but we do know that Scott's not going to be running for vice chair next year. So we're going to need a new vice chair, and I would hope that the vice chair would be someone who would want to take the reins the following year, in which case I'll be working with you for that year, asking you maybe to attend some of the meetings. If not the board meetings, then the chair also has the privilege of participating in the UPWP meetings, the administration and finance meeting, and those are 4 times a month. The UPW, they kind of vary a bit. They're kind of clustered around developing a UPWP, and then there is the congestion management program, and I think there are 2 of those a year, so we certainly want you to participate in at least one of those, so you can just get a little more up to speed, and then we just work on stuff together so that it's a more seamless transfer, so please, someone or someone's, think about vice chair next year. So that's that on that topic. I'll stop and ask questions, or maybe get a volunteer already. Yeah, okay. I'm not taking the volunteer already thing as an offense, but just think about it. We'll be looking for nominations, I think, in October, and I think the election's in November. Mr. Onoff, what will we tell? Actually, I don't think he can be vice chair, can he? Yeah, all right. Yeah. So let's see. More. The chair's report, and this kind of along the lines of what I mentioned about the MPO University. There was a really good corridor study for Framingham and Natick. And as Ken mentioned, I think our corridor studies are really good. And they have lots of potential projects in them. And I think this would be a good maybe case study for us to do, where we look at this corridor project and try to see what kinds of projects could come out of them, and then try to find out what it is that it would take the communities to do them. think it would be appropriate for us to do that. I mean, I will certainly touch base, I mean, with Ned or Tegan, I mean, or the chair of the board to see if the advisory council is not maybe getting out of its lane, you know, in doing that. I'm not really saying that we go out and promote them, but it may be that what I'm thinking of us doing is so close to that it's distinct without a difference. You know, but certainly try to understand what it would take me for a corridor project to be more fully realized. I mean, so what we having. If people feel it's a good idea, well, two things. If you all think it's a good idea, let me know. If you think it's a bad idea, please let me know that too. And then I'll find out to what extent it's something that people think is worth doing, you know, and then we'll go from there, you know. Other than that, you know, there's a state long-range plan initiative meeting that's being done, and it's more along the lines of a long-range transportation plan for the MPOs, you know, and we had some talk about the bus network redesign, but I'm not really thinking of anything else that really popped out other than that corridor study from the last couple of meetings. But if anyone has any questions, you know, pausing a little bit, just want to pop it on the screen here and see if there was something I missed. Yeah. No, not really anything I missed. Okay. Yes, David?
Yeah, thanks, Len. You covered a lot of ground there, and I'm sort of backtracking a little bit to the discussion you mentioned of the outreach to new members, and I guess I just wanted to acknowledge Stella's offer to sort of assist us in that effort, and I think that would be great. My personal suggestion, and I know this is kind of dated, but the way I imagined it is we should periodically, I don't know how frequently that is, but periodically, I think it's worth having some kind of message that goes out officially from somebody like Stella, some staffer that goes to the tip contacts in all the towns in the region, and makes a considered appeal about, you know, this is, hey town, you don't have anybody who's part of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. Let me tell you why that might be useful to you. And if a message like that went out once a year at least, I think it would be worthwhile, and it can be signed by the chair, the vice chair, whatever. But I just sort of feel like that initiative could be very helpful.
Well, I like that idea. I mean, I think maybe Stella looks like she was about to say something. You want to say something, Stella?
Well, I'm jotting down notes because I like that idea as well. Yeah, I mean, this, you know, stressing the importance of this council as a way to get involved if you don't hold a seat on the board, or if you're not, you know, regularly a participant in these conversations. I think that's a great idea.
And so I think, and also the MBTA advisory board offered me to include messaging about us, meaning their outreach, meaning so I'm going to find out from them when they're planning on doing outreach to the communities, meaning maybe they're not thinking about doing it as soon as we'd like. Maybe they would consider pulling that up, and we could do a joint letter. And would that fit in with your notion, David?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, right. I think it's just basically trying to keep the current situation, latest developments should be reflected a little bit in that letter. I think we had years ago an annual habit of sending a message like that, but I think we fell in a rut of kind of pulling out the last year's letter and changing the date and sending it off again. And I think we ended up doing ourselves a disservice because it just became just another thing to ignore. But yeah. if instead we're creating a letter that says, hey, you know how complex this world is, and you'd like some help interpreting it, we're ready to assist with that and integrate you into this process, this is how you do it. You know, some basic thing like that, I think could be a, I mean, we want to sell the benefit of this council, but give them something that here's an immediate benefit. You will understand this world better if you participate through us.
Well, David, I mean, you just kind of wrote the letter, so it's like, I mean, I'm not going to volunteer for anything. I'll just ask you to come. Well, you know what? We have the recording, so we go back and maybe,
Well,
transfer.
I'm happy to consult or whatever, but I also, I'm not trying to take over. It was an idea and Stella asked, and so lucky her, she got my mouth full.
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't think we're proprietary or territorial here at all. It's like, you want to contribute, it's like, bring it on, Mr. Montgomery. So, Jen.
Yeah, I just wanted a small note to add on to that it might be worth noting, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but that like the town, like my understanding is that a lot of places like staff are kind of at capacity, and which is part of why they, just an ongoing issue, but that you can appoint a representative to this body who is not a actual member of staff. Like if you have a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee, or just like a neighbor who is like very involved with this type of stuff, that like this is a good place for them to like use their kind of interest and energy and helping the town stay up to date on this type of thing. But correct me if I'm wrong if that's not allowed, but I believe that you can have someone else appointed. Yes, there, yeah.
I think it is, and I think that's one thing that kind of distinguishes us from perhaps the advisory council for the Miami-Dade MPO. Because when I looked at their composition, they're all like either elected folks. I mean, I know that's the case for the MPO, but even for their advisory council, I mean, these were either elected people or the appointed people. Who weren't simply like appointed advocates. I mean, we're much. I think we're, in a sense, we're kind of closer to the your advocate resident, than their advisory council is. So it's definitely a different model, So yeah, that's just to say, Jen, that what you said is possible, and I think, I kind of like that aspect. So great. Yeah. So I'm going to move on. So we have minutes from the May 11th meeting. It was all linked up, everything. I'm looking at it now. It looked pretty good to me, but I'm not the one that gets to make a motion to approve them. I can't even second it. Two other people have to do that.
I'll make the motion.
Right. Yeah. So I have a motion.
I don't think I'm allowed to second, otherwise I would.
Okay, so thanks for saying that. See, so
second the motion.
Thank you, Owen. And so I guess there's one other question I could ask, but I'm not going to ask. I'm just gonna run down the participants list. Sorry about that. Let me pull up a participants list. So Anna Christina? Yes. No? You're abstaining? We're voting.
No. Do I have to raise my hand?
Oh no, I'm calling your name, and so I just need a yay or a nay.
Yay.
Yeah, all right. David Montgomery?
I'm abstaining, just so I wasn't there, but.
Okay, gotcha. Fred Mosley?
Yep.
Thank you. John McQueen?
Sure.
On McDonald?
Yes.
Scott Stakes?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So we'll review, and I think there'll be enough to approve the minutes. If not, we'll get them tossed back to us and we'll have to do it again. But I think we're all set here, so that's that. And I think there's nothing else. I hopped around a little bit, just going back. I think that's everything, so if you want 13 minutes back, you can vote to adjourn the meeting. Otherwise, we can hang out here and then the meeting's just gonna end on its own,
I wanted to say thanks, Len. Thank you for inviting Ken. That was good to hear. And I'm glad we're thinking about this.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And so folks, the next meeting will be on the second Wednesday of the month. Maybe a shorter one. The topic's going to be I had asked Jonathan Church to look into getting us a tour of a jet engine in Southie that kind of powers up the T in case of an emergency. I don't know where that's going, but we also wouldn't know when we could do it. So there may be something else for us to do in August, but let's plan on the meeting, And so, Dave, hands up.
Yeah. Len, I don't know if there's much to say, but is there anything one can say about the staffing situation? Is sorry to put you on the spot, Stella. Is Stella our sort of new regular person, or is there going to be an assigned regular staffer for all our meetings?
Yes,
I think that will be me.
And right now it's Bradley, and actually, you know what? There is something I forgot. So we are going to get the draft UPWP on next Thursday, and so we will need to pull together our 3-3 committee to do our letter, so we can have that ready to go for our next RTAC meeting in August. Which is another reason, I guess, for us to have a meeting in August. We'll send more communication out with this, and I think we have our 3C committee team. But if you're interested in that, just let me know, and I'll make sure you're added to the email list. All right. So a motion to adjourn. We're not gonna take a vote after this one. We'll just get the motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, and a second, and then we're done. So on a motion from Anna Christina Friscosa and David Montgomery, second by David Montgomery, we're done. Good night.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Jen, oh, I just lost Jen. Oh, Jen, can you hang out?
I'm still here. Yeah.
So I was supposed to get back in touch